Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mike Maddox, the president of ASK, and I have here with me Josh Gambala.
Hey, Mike.
How you doing, Josh?
Not too bad. Yourself?
I am doing fantastic. And you know what we're doing here? This is our quarter three, or third quarter, depending on how you want to say it, security update
Yes.
on Facebook.
It is.
We do this each and every quarter. So
Third
we did
one.
it first quarter, second quarter, this is the third quarter, and that's what we're doing. And so what we do is we talk about security incidents that have occurred over the previous few months and what business owners out there in Facebook land might need to know about things that have occurred
Right.
in the land of security.
And a lot of these are very new within the last couple of weeks.
Right, especially the ones we're going to talk about today. And if you don't know, if you haven't caught us before, Josh Gambala heads up our Enhanced Security Services division at ASK, and that division was started in 2015. We recognize that the traditional methods of managing IT departments for businesses were necessary but no longer sufficient, that we needed a much more robust security team, and so Josh built a team within ASK's wall, so to speak.
A couple solutions.
A couple of solutions on top of that to be an enhancement for our client base and to provide you with the latest security products and solutions to protect your business. So that's what Josh does. And before we get started, Josh, because I want to get into the news from the previous quarter and the things that you want to highlight for those that are listening, I want to say a little bit about the state of the industry we're in. I mentioned 2015 is when we started our Enhanced Security Services division, and we did that because the traditional methods of IT management, antivirus, malware protection, web protection, email protection, those are all good things. There was a time where those were considered sufficient. That was good for a business. You had that, you were pretty well covered, for most businesses, depending on the industry you're in, and some businesses needed something more robust. But in general, that was enough. We got to a point in time a couple years back where that was no longer sufficient in and of itself, correct?
Yeah, definitely. I think that even if those were sufficient before, there are a lot of security mechanisms that many organizations just didn't recognize that they needed. They thought they were too small.
Yeah.
There really isn't a company that's too small anymore.
Not at all. That's pure vodka, by the way.
Oh, well, I went with brown liquor. That's why my glass isn't clear.
We're good then. Yeah, just kidding, of course. You're right.
That'll get cut
You're
out.
right, and that'll get taken care of in post-production. In any event, so Enhanced Security comes along and says, you know what? We can do much more than that. We can do things like cybersecurity assessments for your business, give you an idea of how vulnerable you are.
Yeah, our risk assessment.
Risk assessment. We can do user education. We can do phishing tests. We can do intrusion tests. We can do all kinds of things to give you as a business owner an idea of how much at risk your business is. Because let's face it, you really don't know until you have an expert come in and do some analysis for you. So your team does a lot of that.
Yeah, I don't think there's really been any organization we've gone to where we haven't been able to highlight items that they could improve on. In addition, we made them aware of a lot of things they just don't take into consideration. Most IT departments are focused on the daily operations of the network and the servers, making sure people's computers are working, line of business applications, and focusing on security isn't necessarily their number one priority.
Top of their list, right, absolutely. And so that's what your team does, and we also have solutions that you can put in place to protect the business, beyond just the assessment stage, right? So you take the assessment, you work with a client to determine where on the spectrum of security they want to fall. Because let's face it, not everybody wants a hardened, complete, secure, business. I mean, the more security you implement, the less productivity you have. So there's a little bit of a paradigm. I mean,
there's always a give and take with it, for sure.
Yeah. So the idea is to help the customer understand where the sweet spot is for their business in their industry, and then put the solution in place that meets that need. Correct?
Yeah, we try to do as much as that's transparent as possible. That's not always the case. Something like multi-factor authentication or changes to the way people have access to files. Those can obviously affect productivity. We usually find that effect becomes less over time as people get used to doing it. They just do it automatically. But sure, there's an impact.
And let's face it, we live in a day and age where we have to do some basic minimums. I mean, or run the risk of losing our business. As a business owner, I recognize that.
Or costing you a lot of money.
So let's get into the last 3 months. There's been 3 things that you want to highlight for us today, and I'm going to ask you about them each one at a time.
All right.
And explain what they were and what it means to the folks that are listening to us today. The first one is there's been a change in the way that phishing campaigns are being conducted, a really dramatic change, and this is very recent.
Right, compared to what we used to see, which was just more normal campaigns where they would either come from a mailbox that was specifically created for that, just a generic one. You probably have seen before where it'll be like a name and a bunch of numbers, or just a big enumerated long line. What we've seen them doing now is people are compromising Microsoft Office 365 accounts, possibly using the old style or the more recent, traditional style of phishing. Right. And once they have access to those Office 365 accounts, they're loading a Word document or a PDF document onto that user's SharePoint. So the document is hosted at Microsoft at this point. If you were to send a link out to it, it would say it's going to SharePoint.com.
Okay, so using this method, I get an email, and in it there's a link. I hover over the link, which is the way you can tell. Traditionally, you could tell if it's phishing or not.
That's how most users are looking. Right. That's the clue that most people are looking for when they get an email.
You've taught us that.
Right.
You hover over it. If the link doesn't take you to the place it's supposed to take you to, or if that's not what the URL is, you don't click on it. Mm-hmm. This is a legitimate link. It says it is Microsoft SharePoint.
Yeah.
So you go, that's legit. So you click on that. Once you get there, what happens?
Well, now you go directly to that document, and that document's going to contain another link. The ones we've seen so far are ones that say, to view this entire document, and it'll only show you like the first paragraph, and the rest of it will be blurred out. That one's pretty good. We've also seen ones where it says you have to authenticate your user and just has a link and the SharePoint logo. When you click on the link inside that document, that's what's actually then going to take you to the malicious website.
Okay. So given all that, I mean, so it's much more sophisticated, much harder for a business person to tell this is a phishing email. What are we supposed to do with that? I mean, how do we avoid falling victim to this kind of a scam?
Well, if you're only looking for improper links in phishing emails, you're not in a great spot. Okay. There are other clues and other ways that you can detect those. We've tried to get people away from relying on just that, using what we call contextual clues, or making behavior changes.
Right.
So contextual clues would be like receiving an email, and in the subject line it'll say as in if it's a reply to something when you never initiated any communication, versus just hovering over the link. Or expecting there to be nothing or something different.
So user education is important.
It is. And it's you probably can't just go with user education. You're at the point where you probably need continuous reinforced education.
Right. So which we do here monthly. We do a security training module for every staff member. It takes 10-15 minutes, but it includes a lot of that kind of stuff. So that's scary stuff. More user education, continuous user education is the answer to that. This is only going to evolve more, right? I mean, they're going to get harder and harder to detect.
Yeah, and even this campaign itself is already starting to morph a little bit. And
two-factor authentication, so...
Yeah, that's definitely a great step to put in.
If you don't know what two-factor authentication is when you log into your email account, Office 365 or otherwise, you need 2 methods of identifying who you are. So it's your username, password, and it may be a code on your phone that you put in.
Or a push notification.
That pops up on the phone. That is a great tool to protect against these kind of email attacks. Okay.
So we should probably clarify. It's not a great tool to protect against those type of attacks. It's a great tool to mitigate the damages after they're successful.
After they're already in.
Right, because they won't be able to log into that account and then compromise it. It doesn't stop someone from necessarily giving their credentials away.
Right.
And one of the risks that you have there is if they've reused those credentials in another place that now doesn't have multi-factor authentication, it's possible that an attacker could move over to that platform.
You refuse to let me feel good, don't you?
Sorry.
It's just impossible for you, isn't it?
Okay. My job is to think about the scary things for you.
No, but 2FA is a very good, it's another layer of security. Okay.
Yes.
Second thing I wanted to ask you about that happened recently is Google, a new method for forced sign-on to Chrome, right?
Yeah, this is...
Talk about that.
This is very recent. An update to Google Chrome now will log in your Gmail account user, for instance, if you've logged into another Google app. So if you've accessed the Google Play Store, if you've logged into Gmail, if you've logged into YouTube, it will log your browser in under those credentials also.
Okay.
Now, right now, they are claiming that Sync, which syncs browser add-ons and bookmarks, is optional. You have to opt in for that to work, but this is kind of scary because in the past, we've seen this crossover from home life and business life have some really unexpected consequences. For instance, people using VPN connections and forgetting to disconnect from them and then going about their normal browsing activity. So all that
Still connected back to the office
still connect.
network.
So that traffic goes across there.
Right.
And may raise some red flags.
Okay, so if you're using a Google app and you have not disabled the automatic login, it could log you in it could log you in via Chrome to your Gmail account.
Yeah, Google is kind of claiming
which is more easily compromised. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, the fear is, okay, let's say you use Chrome at the office and you use Chrome at home.
Yeah.
And at home, you do a bunch of research that may violate your company's acceptable use policy. And you create bookmarks for those. And you synchronize those bookmarks. Well, now when you go back into the office and open up Chrome, guess what bookmarks are going to be in there?
Okay. So you've exposed your business environment to areas that maybe don't meet the minimum security standards.
Yeah, or if you possibly installed a malicious add-on for Chrome at home and it synchronizes to your office. There are a lot of implications, and Google is being very weird about it, as they usually are.
So what do we do about that? I mean, how do we prevent that?
Right now, stop using Chrome.
Okay. That's your recommendation, is don't use Chrome?
You have to at least be aware that this exists. What Google has said is, look, we give you the option to enable sync or not enable sync after forcing you to log in, which is bizarre. Why not just go back to the way it was and not force people to log in?
Okay, but you would recommend don't use Chrome for a while until this issue gets resolved.
I don't see any reason for Google to implement this except for data collection on their part. And they basically just gave themselves a nice way of getting into a lot of corporate environments for new data collection.
Got it. The third one is around Twitter, and a new bug was discovered for Twitter. So talk about that.
So there's some conflicting stories, but the official version is that some code was changed. It sounds like for developer access to Twitter. Now this was unfortunately in May of 2017. When that code was changed, what it did was made it so that an authorized developer, when trying to access a user's messages, a non-authorized developer might have also received them.
Okay.
Now, Twitter is saying that they don't have any evidence of misuse, but they also haven't completed their investigation. So it seems a little premature to claim no misuse before they're done.
So we need to be aware that tweets that you may have put out there,
direct messages also are included,
may have been shared with people who are not authorized to receive them.
Yeah, at least possibly third-party
People
developers.
may not know that developers under the Twitter platform are authorized to receive your Twitter messages. So that
if you authorize them,
yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Right. So, but in this case, the leak is it could have gone to anybody.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
to some of the non-authorized developers.
so
But yeah.
and I guess it's probably good policy. So getting back to what do you do about that? Assume that what you put out there on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn is going to be seen by probably people you don't intend.
Yeah,
for.
Twitter is not Signal. It is not supposed to be a secure messaging app.
Right.
So I would say if you have any type of communication, if you're involved in news or you
Sure.
have any connections with any type of social programs and you're communicating over Twitter, you probably need to
Assume it's going to be seen
reevaluate
by
that.
the world.
You should,
I mean,
yeah.
that's what those messaging platforms are for.
Right. I mean, it is kind of a betrayal of their users to not take
It is.
better care, but
But from a user's perspective, we need to make that assumption.
We should,
Because
yeah.
it's happened time and time again. It's happened to Facebook, it's happened to LinkedIn, it's happened to Twitter. So, okay. Anything else you want to share with our viewers before we leave? That's a lot.
yeah.
My head hurts.
I feel like anything more, is just not fair.
Now, you're not a real feel-good guy, Josh.
I am. I feel great about security. It was much worse in the past.
And
though.
if you have questions about this, I would highly recommend every business owner out there contact your local managed IT service provider, your IT provider, Ask hard questions. Every IT provider in the industry says they're experts in security because, let's face it, there's a lot of money to be made in security these days. They're not all experts in security. It takes a team of people that really know this stuff at a deep level, like Josh and his team. And if you have questions for Josh, feel free to contact us at ASK. You can reach us at 877-ASK-FOR-ASK, 877-ASK-FOR-ASK. And check us out on the web at justask.net. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great afternoon.